You say you don't like to be touched. You say you don't need physical connection. But if you could choose the type of touch, if you could choose who touched you and how, then would you want it? Because I think for a lot of people that say that they don't like being touched and they would rather be alone, it's often the case that they have been touched in ways that were not what they would have chosen, that were either non consensual, that were downright abusive, that were aggressive, that were not loving, that were not nurturing. And obviously, if that's the case and those are the experiences that you've had, you're not going to want to be touched by other people. That totally makes sense. My question is, if there were a scenario where you were in control, because so much of it has to do with having lost control and having not been the one in control in these situations in our past where we were touched. And when I say touched, I mean it could be any type of physical connection, human to human contact that was made. So whether we were hit by our parents, whether we were bullied and beat up at school, or whether we were the victims of something far more sinister and far more serious, like being touched inappropriately by adults when we were kids, or as women, having been sexually assaulted. I don't even know if I can say that or if I'm going to, like, my ad revenue is going to get removed from this video if I talk about that. I don't know. But these in all of these cases, it totally makes sense that a person would retreat into themselves and only feel safe with themselves. And the boundary, the actual physical boundary of our body, would be something that they would not want breached by anyone other than themselves, because that's like them taking their power back. And I have had a lot of people in the comments of my videos saying that they don't feel safe being touched by anyone else, and they don't have people in their lives that they feel comfortable with, and even people in relationships who don't like being touched. In fact, I had a friend who doesn't like being touched. However, and she says she doesn't like being touched. She does not like being touched by her husband. She doesn't want to be cuddled. She doesn't want to like spoon in bed together. She doesn't like snuggling. She doesn't want, his arm around her. But when they're in public, she will allow him to kiss her. She's much more okay with sexual contact. She's totally fine with having sex with him and being in that kind of energy, almost like dominatrix kind of energy, where she feels much more in control. And then she also has daughters, and she's totally okay with the touch and cuddling her daughters. She's totally okay with that. So the conclusion that I draw, my thought on that, is that that is the result of having some probably painful experiences of touch with men in particular, just because of the pattern that I observe there. I can think about my own experience. For example, I talk a lot about touch and a lot about connection and loneliness and the need for human connection. And I'm a massage therapist, so I know it intimately well. And I know how healing touch can be. And I know how much people are deprived of it. And I know how unsafe people can feel with it. Really, truly, it's not like everyone that comes for a massage is comfortable with it and is super open to touch. There are so many people's bodies who are very, very guarded, and you can feel it. I mean, it's like very clear. You can read a person's nervous system really clearly when they're on your table and you're working on them, and when you're interacting with their body. And there are bodies that will not relax. There's so much guarding and protection happening at a nervous system level. Even if I consciously can encourage them to relax certain parts of their bodies, they can't do it. They actually can't do it because it's not in their conscious control. The body is your subconscious. If you guys, maybe you know that already, that the body is the subconscious. So the body it's not going to respond to just your conscious commands. And everyone's body has a story, okay? So it totally makes sense if you have had experiences in your life that made it so that intimate connection with other people is uncomfortable. I get it. And I would never say that a person should just deliberately override that. But I do think it's something that is possible to heal, if you want to call it healing, possible to change. And I think it's beneficial. I really think that it is a worthwhile undertaking to start to explore it more. And just ask yourself the questions. Have you ever considered the ways that you were touched growing up? I'm sure for people that have been through traumatic or abusive situations, that have had blatant abuse or trauma, obviously have thought about it. And for sure, women who have been assaulted have thought about it and considered it, and probably can very clearly see how it affects then the way that they relate to other people physically. But think about just the way that touch was in your family. Think about the way that your parents touched each other or didn't. How did your siblings touch each other? Were you a touchy-feely family? Or was that just like not something you did? Did you guys give hugs? Did you give kisses? Did you ever feel like boundaries were crossed? Were there ever times as a kid when you wanted to be touched and you didn't get it? Because, like I've said so many times, touch is so important for regulating our nervous systems and for co-regulation. And when a child can't regulate themselves, and they are 100% emotional based beings, right? Their logic and reason is not online yet until like age 7 or 8. So when they're very emotional, they require the co-regulation from another person. And if you are in a family where you just like don't touch a lot, that child is left to try to manage that level of intensity of the different emotions they're experiencing all on their own, and they just simply cannot do it. That is going to create a person in the future on either extreme, either extremely anxious and in need of close physical contact all the time and very touchy-feely and almost like smothering, and really, really this like grasping kind of energy, engulfing kind of energy, or someone who is extremely avoidant and has cut off their own connection to their body's needs and to the need for closeness with other humans and for touch. If you ask me, that doesn't mean that they don't actually need it and that they wouldn't benefit from it. It just means that it's scary or it's unsafe or it's unfamiliar. And by the way, I know that there are people with like, sensory processing disorders and stuff, especially a lot more nowadays. And we will not even really get into that and like why that has become so common, because I really just don't want to get into that. But bird, I have some thoughts. Obviously, I have thoughts about everything. Thoughts about why that has exploded. But um, the point is, I realize that there are people who have these like sensory processing kind of disorders, whatever you want to call them. I'm not saying that I would probably eliminate that population from the conversation, although I do think that touch can be really important for them. It in a very different way, and it would have to be like in a very well informed way by like trained, people who know how to approach people with those diagnoses. Overall, I think that we are running a massive touch deficit in our culture. And I think that a lot of people feel the way they do and have retreated into isolation because of painful experiences, because of neglect, just because of not being paid enough attention to, not being given the love that they desired. And so now it's so much easier to just not expect it, to not want it. And they become more comfortable without it, because anything that they got before was either painful or just lackluster and just like didn't meet the need that they had. It wasn't enough. And it's so much easier to just cut it off and say, I don't need that. I don't want that, rather than like yearning for something constantly that you're not getting. And it's almost like being breadcrumbed. It's almost like you're just getting these little bits and it's never enough. And it's never enough. And, a lot of times it makes you want it more and more, but sometimes it just makes it so that you're just not going to try anymore. It's not worth it, right? It's like, I don't want to be hurt anymore. I don't want to be abused. I don't want to be mistreated. I don't want to open up. I don't want to risk it. The intimacy, the connection, it's not worth it. And that to me is a really sad state of affairs. So you may disagree with me. You can let me know in the comments. That's pretty much all I wanted to say on that for today, you guys. I think it's a question worth pondering. I'd be very curious to hear if any of you guys agree, disagree, or if you just think I'm dead wrong and I'm really not understanding this different type of person that doesn't want the connection. And that maybe there is some unicorn personality out there that apparently does not require the same biological inputs as the rest of our mammalian human species. I don't know. But that is all for today, you guys. I will see you very soon in the next video. Ciao!